Good evening, everyone. Welcome from coming here tonight, and for those who are joining us on the live stream. My name is Mark. I'm one of the ministers here at the church, and it's our privilege to host this event and to thank our candidates who've come this evening. So the Honourable Luke Howarth, Nicole Paul, Nicole Shires and Sharon Hall. We gratefully thank them for giving up their time tonight in the midst of a busy election campaign to come and share with us. So let's welcome them here tonight. Just a few housekeeping things. If you're looking for a toilet, they're diagonally across the breezeway and also down the end. And in the unlikely event of emergency, just need to gather in the car park. One of the reasons that as a church we're hosting this event, because we take seriously what our Lord Jesus teaches us in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father who is in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So what does it mean as Christians to live, to work and to vote according to kingdom values? And so part of the opportunity tonight is to be able to ask, to listen to our candidates, to hear them respond to questions, and have the opportunity to ask them questions so that we can discern what that means for us as we vote. And part of the reason as we also gather is to model what Jesus taught us in this divided times about loving our neighbour as ourselves. So as we come, why don't we start our night in prayer? Gracious God, we give you thanks for this country, Australia, that we live in. We give you thanks that we have the freedom to gather. We have the freedom to gather to worship. We have the freedom to vote according to our conscience. Lord, these are things that we do not take for granted, and they are a blessing, and we are thankful for them. We are blessing for the system of government that we have in our country. And we give thanks for every elected member and every person who has put themselves forward at this election as a candidate. We pray that you would grant them all strength and wisdom in this time. Pray that you would grant your people wisdom as we seek to discern your will and what it means to vote according to your kingdom. And Lord, particularly tonight, we pray for all our candidates here. We pray that you would bless and sustain them through your grace and your mercy. In the name of Jesus, amen. I'm going to hand over tonight to Phil Smith, who's going to MC tonight. Phil is a pastor from the Sunshine Coast, also has a long background in local radio, so he'll be our MC for tonight. Thanks, Phil.
Good evening, everyone. And I won't do all the disclosures you might want to know about in terms of my political involvement, but I will say this. Amongst my past lives were 13 years in uniform, and I deployed 6 times overseas. And I have been to places where, East Timor for instance, people came out of the first election they had ever had. They'd been a colony for hundreds of years. They'd been invaded by the Indonesians for 25 years, and they came out of the polling booth with a purple stain on their thumb and a smile like a slice of watermelon. And every time I come back to this country, I remember that. I value our democracy, and I really value your being here, and all of you and each of you for being a part of this. It's a really significant thing. So this evening is an opportunity for us, and it is remarkable on this election how many people have already voted. Is there anybody here, by the way, named Mrs. Robinson? I was just humming that Paul Simon song, Going to the Candidates Debate, Mrs. Robinson, but she's not here, and that's okay. But yeah, the number of people who have already cast their vote, and in that this evening is our opportunity to hear from most of our local candidates and also for us to consider our own positions on this. So as you've heard, we have representatives here from the LNP, from the Greens, One Nation and from Family First. An apology from Emma Comer with the Labor Party. She was invited but had a long-standing already commitment to this, sends her apologies and is committed to listening to the people of Petrie electorate, including the churches in the area. Now, long after the advertising materials and the date for this were set, the Trumpet for Patriots registered a candidate, Ryan Mensink, and he is not able to be with us this evening. A couple of things. We are going to have an opportunity for questions from the floor once we've heard from our candidates. So we're using a system called Slido, and it worked for me. So yeah, it works. Any idiot can do this. So you simply get onto www.slido.com, and that code that is there will put you into the Petrie Churches forum. And if you have a question that you would like to type in, there you go, and Tim will receive that over there. There is another really high-tech way of doing this. Turn that piece of paper you have over, grab a pencil, write your question on the back, and put it in that red box, and that will work just as well. We're going to collate the questions, and we'll see which of those we can deal with when there's time as we go. The structure for this evening, I'm going to, will vary the order of things as we go, but 5 minutes for each of our candidates to simply introduce themselves and pitch to you the things that they hold dear to their hearts. At the risk of stealing the LNP's slogan, my job is to keep them on track. There will be a bell that will ring at 4 minutes, and we will be finishing at 5, folks. Get used to it. If you become the Member of Parliament, you'll know what it's all about. And then when we're going to come to a set of 5 questions that do come very much from our church ecosystem and context. And those questions have already been sent to our candidates. They've had a chance to consider those, and they'll have 3 minutes on each of those questions to give their response. So the questions are around personal and community religious freedom, what it is in this country for organisations and individuals to express their religious freedoms. A question about gambling. It's a huge issue in this country. Do you know this is the country that loses the most per capita, $31 billion a year? It has all sorts of impact. Maybe it's an issue under the radar. There's a question about the cost of living, obviously, and related to that closely, the affordability of housing and homelessness. And I know that in Petrie and in the Redcliffe area, this is a very visible, well above the radar matter. And the care of creation. What is it that we would say about how we steward the resources of the earth? Again, that's a very simple question in church terms, but very complex in terms of policies. So I think we will begin with our sitting member. I'd like to introduce Luke Howarth to take his first time with us. Shadow Assistant Treasurer, Shadow Minister for Financial Services, and of course the member for Petrie. Luke understands small business as the backbone to Australia's economic well-being. And for a decade he worked as a sales rep at the famous Toombul Music and for Sony Australia, before joining the family's business as Managing Director at Sandgate Pest Control. Luke, it's a pleasure to have you with us this evening. Your 5 minutes begins.
Well, thanks very much, Phil. Ladies and gentlemen, it's wonderful to be here with you tonight. I want to thank the other 3 candidates that are here tonight. It's been lovely to get to know a couple of you over the booth, and Sharon, to meet you tonight as well, so thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, as Phil said, my name's Luke Howarth, and I do appreciate the invite to be here tonight from Mark Cornford and the Uniting Church here in Redcliffe. I just want to acknowledge my wife, Louise, of 26 years, is with me here tonight. Thank you for being here. And also one of my sons, Sam, who's just finished school last year, as well as my mum and a few other people. But welcome to everyone here. I want to acknowledge some of my supporters up the back. Thank you for your efforts and being part of my team. I appreciate every single one of you. And to those people online, thank you for watching tonight. I'm Luke Howarth. As Phil said, I'm the member for Petrie. I was elected in 2013 and have been the member of Petrie for the last 12 years. My role is to represent the local people here in the Moreton Bay and Brisbane City Council electorate. And how I do that is I get out and listen to people, understand what is important to them, understand some of the struggles and what they're going through with life. And then when I go to Canberra, I bring those issues to Canberra and speak about what is happening down there. Being a little bit more experienced now, in my 4th term, I'm also the Shadow Assistant Treasurer and Shadow Minister for Financial Services within the Liberal National Party. And should we have the opportunity to win government in 4 days' time, then I will be a Minister as a Shadow, or as the Assistant Treasurer and Minister for Financial Services, which covers a whole range of issues. And so my number 1 role, but, is to represent the people of Petrie. Given we're in church, I thought I'd just start off by saying that I'm a non-denominational Christian. So whether I'm here in a Uniting Church or a Catholic church, last Tuesday I was there just after the death of the Pope, or whether it's a Baptist church or the church that I worship at, City Point in Redcliffe, the Anglican Church, I went there for midnight mass, it doesn't matter. It's all the one Lord. We're saved through Jesus Christ and what he did for us on the cross. We recently had Easter, And it says right there, he is not here, he is risen. And that's 100% true. And that plays a big part in my life, because as much as I'm standing here tonight in front of each one of you, I believe that there is life after we pass, and that life here is about relationships. We're given an opportunity for a limited time to be here, and for me, life is about relationships and how I can serve others. You can't take anything with you, the suit that I'm wearing or the car that I drive. You enter the world with nothing and you leave with that. And so for me, when I treat people and see people, whether it's members of the Greens or the Labor Party or whoever it is, I treat everyone with the attitude that I'm okay, you're okay. And whether you're homeless or whether you're the Prime Minister, that's the way I treat everyone. So I think in Parliament as well, for me, delivering outcomes that changes people's lives is what, I try to do. Trust and truth are absolutely essential. It's really sad in this country that people think that politicians can't tell the truth. The reality is that there's a lot of good parliamentarians that are honest. I try to be one of them. And if I see parliamentarians that aren't, I call it out. Ladies and gentlemen, in the last 3 years under the Albanese Labor government, costs have skyrocketed. We've seen a massive fall in our standard of living. In fact, we've seen the biggest fall in the standard of living in our histories, in the history of Australia, in 3 years. Cost of living has skyrocketed, whether it's housing, homelessness, rents, mortgages, electricity, food, insurance, gas. The reality is that these costs have gone up, and it's impacting people's lives just because they can't afford to pay their rent, they can't afford to put insurance on their home. The Coalition, if we're elected, has a number of cost of living measures that will address these things immediately right now, including 25 cents a litre off fuel, including $1,200 back in your tax return for everyone earning under $104,000 a year. That was scrapped by the Albanese government when they came into power. But the most important thing that we can do is rein in spending, reduce red tape and regulation to bring down the cost of living right across the board. And Phil, you didn't quite get our slogan right. Our slogan is, let's get Australia back on track. I'm Luke Howarth and I ask for your support. Thank you.
Please accept it as a paraphrase. Folks, the next person I'd like to invite up to the podium is Nicole Shires from One Nation. Nicole has a fascinating way of seeing the world because she's a gym manager and personal trainer. She's seen a lot of people make promises to themselves and she holds them to it. She doesn't take their excuses. And this is somebody who has run a small business, sets goals and wants to see people achieve them. That's kind of the frame in which she's coming from as she stands for this election. Nicole Shires from One Nation.
All right, guys, we're going to start with 15 star jumps and 10 burpees, and then we'll get underway. No, I wouldn't do that for everyone today, but I really appreciate the opportunity to be here for speaking with you all today, and to my fellow candidates as well, guys. I'm here, as we've stated, a gym manager and a personal trainer currently, but I have spent my life in this area. I was born down the road nearly 37 years ago, two weeks ago, born and bred in the area, and I grew up in this area when things were different. Everyone was proud to be Australian, everyone thrived and lived off that, and I've seen the way things have gone, and I stepped up and went, I would like my nieces and my nephews to experience how I grew up, where everyone was proud to be Australian. You could afford to drive down the road to meet your friends. You could safely walk down the road to meet your friends, where the dream of owning your home was actually possible. I myself, as a first home buyer, can see that goal drifting further and further away. For me, it's every dollar we save, I feel like it's $5 further away. So for me, guys, today, I'm proud to be here as your One Nation candidate. I apologise for referring to my phone. Being part of a small party, I'm having to work full-time while I'm campaigning, so there's a lot of long hours in this. I'm standing because Australians, everyday Australians, need a fresh voice and an everyday Australian to start representing them again. There are honest politicians out there, we know them, they're few and far between, but we need someone to keep them accountable. Like we stated, I'm all about that accountability and transparency. Own up to it. If you say you're going to do something, do it. Make it happen. Take the action to make it happen. If you're not going to do it, you can't do it. Be honest with us. Let us know. Be the voice that says, all right, I can't, but let's find the steps to make this possible. For me, aligning with One Nation or representing One Nation, I'm about putting Australians first. We're after practical solutions and we're done with the political games. It's time that we all step forward and make things happen. Lower taxes and cutting wasteful spending. We're looking at billions being promised in spending. Where's the money coming from? We're already going into debt. The last 3 years have been horrendous, yet more and more money is being promised. But there's no game plan. There's no action plan for where that money's coming from. It's just going to magically appear. Same with my home deposit. Same with the money to pay the fuel for my car next week. It's just going to magically appear. No, I've got to work hard for it. Everyday Australians are working hard for it, and I want to make sure that you guys are represented and that the hard-earned money that you earn stays in your pocket. Because if I was asked you all tonight, who's going to spend your money better, you or the government? I can guarantee most of you are going to answer you. You know what's important to you. You know where your money is better spent for you. We're here about housing. We want to make sure that that Australian dream, my dream, of owning my home with my partner and building my family throughout the rest of my life is still there for everyday Australians. It's there for the generation below me to achieve, not just to wait it out for the inheritance, not just to wait it out and hope that one day it'll happen, but to sit there and strategically plan and go, I know that this is possible for me. We're here for the environment. We're here for making sure that you, when you go to turn on the lights that night, that you don't know that it's a choice between turning on the lights or feeding your family the next day. We want to make sure that your concerns and issues that you guys have raised with us are addressed, and that's what I'm here for tonight. So I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you guys tonight, and let's keep going. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. I'm going to invite Sharon Hall to the microphone next from Family First. Sharon has some top priorities in approaching the policies around Family First, and they are family, faith, life and freedom. Looking to create really an opportunity for people to vote for what matters with a clear conscience and without a sense of compromise. Sharon believes strong families, freedom of faith, and protecting the most vulnerable in our local community are critical, and not only for the future of the local community, but for the nation as a whole. Sharon, thank you.
Well, I'm Sharon, and I don't live in your electorate, but I do live in Banyo, 20 minutes away, and I was the Nudgee candidate for Family First. And of course, when you go to Lily, there's 4 or 5 candidates to choose from. That's our Lily candidate, and he's much better than me. He's got a great head for figures, and he and Luke will be able to have a great talk. And he's currently working on a family policy for Family First. So Family First is a small party. We do have a lot of policies, more than we had before. But I'm just here really to put my name on the ballot paper. I'm sorry to say we wish we didn't exist. We wish Family First didn't have to exist. But the Liberal Party has gone along with the swing of all the parties to the left-hand side. And there seems to be a void. There's no one saying the things that we're saying currently. There are people who believe in all the parties, believe the same as we do, but they are constrained by their parties. Whatever it is that happens in parties, that happens to people who go in as conviction politicians and aren't able to say what they want to say. So, yeah, I have been working on the ballots. I'm sorry you haven't met me, Luke. I've been down on the Boondall one supporting Alan's campaign in Lily. I haven't actually run a campaign here in Petrie because, like, we think Luke's a pretty good bloke. and besides, I'm not a person who would make a politician. I'm someone who believes things strongly. I'm happy to get behind people. I'm happy to stand up and do my little bit, but I'm just doing my little bit. And so what I want is what I would like to see is, and what I've been saying on the booths, is put family first. You're supporting, you protect women and children from radical gender ideology, because there's a lot of pain and things that are going on at the moment that are not suitable. I've been clarifying my position when I'm able to by saying that children cannot consent to puberty blockers because they're children. They can't smoke, they can't drink, they can't do anything, so they can't consent to puberty blockers. And they are, and also we want to support the family unit where parents are parenting their children, and we want to see it very clear that if a child wants to transition to another gender, that the parent knows about it, not that they go to school and they're assisted at school and the parent not told, which is actually happening. I also, the Human Rights Law Alliance, which came out of ACL, it's a group of lawyers that have taken a whole pile of cases. One of the things I've also said on the polling booth is you shouldn't have to face the courts if you're a woman who says that a man can't breastfeed, and that's currently happening. We don't have freedom of speech on the right-hand side of politics at the moment. We can't say. There are people who are being persecuted for what they say, like Lyle Shelton is in the courts because he happened to say, and I believe rightly so, that a drag queen is not a good role model to read stories to children in libraries. We're allowed to have our opinions on the right-hand side of politics. It seems like everybody can say what they want to say, but we can't say it without being lambasted, called names. We need to be able to have freedom of speech for all opinions. So I'll try and, let's see if there's anything. Yeah, so basically I've explained that I don't live here, but I'm doing this because I think it's an important thing that needs to be done. I have a financial administration degree, but I have absolutely no skills in the area. I was just bright enough to be able to pass the exams, and it was free in those days. Okay, so strong families form the fundamental building blocks of local communities which strengthen towns, cities and regions. Family First stands for policies that will help build up families rather than tear them down. Family First believes human life begins at conception and should be protected from that moment until natural death. Australian women deserve support, care and choices to carry and raise their children, and will work to create an Australia where every mother and baby receive gold-plated support and abortion becomes unthinkable. Children are our future and must be protected. Modern gender ideology is being forced upon vulnerable children, causing great harm. Family First stands with parents being able to choose the education of their children. Christian schools are under attack by progressive activists, resulting in Christian parents having to fight to educate their children according to their faith. We need to prevent the recommendations of the ALRC, the Australian Law Reform Commission, from being implemented and seek to repeal relevant provisions in the anti-discrimination law. Is that it? Okay, well I think there's heaps on the website.
I'm just trying to work out which is the left and which is the right this evening. It depends on stage right, stage left, or this way or that way. But we're going to get to what is my right. Nikhil is next. Nikhil Paul is with the Greens, and his sense of belonging in Australia, he says, is stimulated by the vibrant communities that he has experienced. And what he still believes is Australia's deep sense of fairness and opportunity for all. This bloke's a software engineer in medical technology, and I find this fascinating. He's built systems that improve lives. He's not so sure that our political systems still do. So that background and that passion for the history and future of technology is leading him to thinking about accessible digital platforms that would provide direct political input from the community. That's a very interesting way to approach the 21st century and politics. And Nikhil, love to hear from you.
Thank you. I do want to extend a big thank you to the Redcliffe Uniting Church for organising this and giving us the platform to express our views, and to my fellow candidates for all the work that you've put into making democracy what it is. I'm not seasoned politically. I'm way better at having conversations, and so expect a lot of ums and ahs from me. My apologies in advance, and a lot of me looking at my notes. I do want to begin by acknowledging the country and the traditional custodians of the lands on which we gather, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I also do want to acknowledge the role that I play as a migrant in the history of this country, and want to put forward a deep sense of gratitude for all that I've been blessed with over here. Now, as mentioned before, my background is in software engineering, but I am also quite involved with the community, whether it's on the cricket field with my team, or in the local music scene with my band, or when it comes to volunteering with grassroots organizations here. I was born and raised in the Middle East, in a country called Oman, to a very traditional Catholic family and a community. In fact, I was pretty much raised in the church. I served my community as the altar server, as a lector, and a church choir organist, which is a role I continue to play even today in my church. Throughout my time here, I have had a lot of conversations, a lot of thoughts about my beliefs, my faiths, my values, and I'm sure I'll continue to do that throughout life. However, one thing that I find interesting is that at the current point where I'm at, I find myself in the same age bracket that Jesus was in for most of the gospel stories. And that's brought about a profound sense of relatability towards him, not just in viewing Jesus as my Holy Father, but also in terms of seeing him as a human being who had radical thought and radical visions, and the way he implemented it, especially in the political situation that he was born into. Now, despite all the questionings and the wanderings, there's one thing that has remained constant through life, and that is the core of Jesus' teachings, which I believe is rooted in faith, in love, in compassion, and forgiveness. This core is what has led me to get involved with grassroots movements, which are involved in addressing the radical injustices, systemic injustices, my apologies, and standing with members of the vulnerable communities. And that's what eventually led me to join the Greens. Now, one of my favorite books in the Bible is the Acts of the Apostles, because I don't see them as stories of faith. I actually see them as guidelines on how to set up a society rooted in the values of Christ, a society that is grounded in mutual care, in economic solidarity, and in boundary-breaking love. And that's why I'm here, proud to stand as the Greens candidate, because I believe it is our movement that best embodies that spirit. When it comes to housing, we believe that housing is a human right, and I think that the Greens are the only party that truly has the gall to fight for that. We want to build public, affordable housing and end tax handouts to wealthy property speculators who have been pushing house prices up for decades. We see education as a public good, and we believe in genuinely free public education, whether it's childcare that we're talking about, early childhood education, or public schools, which, without any hidden costs. We also believe that quality healthcare shouldn't depend on your bank balance, and we want to push for free GP visits and bringing dental and mental into Medicare. We think price gouging should be illegal. That's not just at the supermarkets, but also at the banks and at our fuel and gas supply. We also want to tax billionaires and multinational corporations to fund the services that we all rely on. When it comes to climate, we want to phase out coal and gas and invest into a just transition to clean and renewable energy, and we want to protect our forests, our rivers, and our wildlife. As mentioned earlier, being somebody in the software field, I see the immense potential that we have with the technological systems today in implementing a truly participatory democratic system where I can bring the community with me into the government, where the community gets to deliberate and participate into making the decisions that I make, into having conversations about the bills that I pass and the votes that I cast in Parliament. And this is the society that I want to build here in Petrie. And I know some of you may see this as unrealistic. However, that's where I look to Jesus, and I see someone who didn't settle for what was politically convenient. He stood for radical change. He stood with the poor. He flipped the tables on the powerful. And that's the politics I believe in, one that's rooted in radical love and a future that we build together.
Thank you very much, Nikhil, and thank you all. So the next part of the evening is to take us through a set of questions that the candidates have all received. And in the interests of fairness, and I'll warn you, Nicole, on the first question, you'll be our first response, and then I'll work my way along as we go. So the questions work around the matters of community and individual religious freedom, and we've touched upon that with a couple of the candidates, freedom of speech and expression of one's beliefs. Gambling will be our second question, and these are, as I say, the questions will be up on the board for you to have the exact context. The cost of living is something that I think just about everyone has touched upon, and closely related to that, matters of affordable housing and homelessness. And the final question is around the care of creation and how we see our policies for protecting the natural environment as this generation stewards for what is to come. Now, a reminder, if you have some questions of your own, unrelated to those, questions, not statements, you can put them in through the Slido app or on the back of the sheet and into the red box. If you are watching online, of course, access to Slido is there for you as well. It might be helpful if you put a question in just to say where you're listening, where you're watching. So slido.com and then put in the code that you were given earlier. So let's begin with the first of our questions then, and they'll be up on the screen for us. So on the matters, I'm going to use this microphone. So first on this matter of community religious freedom. Religious freedom is not only about individual rights, but also about the right to form associations and institutions that practice and foster faith. So the question for each of our candidates, how will you protect the positive right for faith-based organisations, including churches, charities and educational institutions, to operate according to their faith? This includes employing staff and engaging volunteers who believe and practice their faith, and also the right of faith-based organisations to have a conscientious objection to practices against their beliefs. Nicole.
Hi guys, I'm back again. Myself personally and One Nation, we strongly support religious freedom, not just for individuals, but for organisations too. We believe that all faith-based institutions must be able to uphold their religious values and without interference from others, from government. This includes their right to employ staff, to engage volunteers, and to share and conscientiously object to activities that conflict with their faith. You strongly believe in your faith, others strongly believe in theirs. There's no reason why each of you can't harmoniously get along, but also stand firmly for what you believe in. You shouldn't be talked down to, you shouldn't be have to oblige to someone else's beliefs and hide your own for that practice. One Nation has consistently advocated for stronger protections in law to ensure that religious organisations continue their important roles in our community. You guys definitely uphold our values within the community. You create stable communities in your own houses for those of us out there, the vulnerable, and the rest of us out there who just want to follow our own faith. So with that, we are always advocating for stronger laws in protection around that, so that you can continue to do the great work that you do without fear of discrimination or legal action. And I apologise for my voice starting to cut out. I've been coaching all morning, so it is starting to get a little bit husky, but that's my few minutes. Thank you.
So as someone who is still very active with my church community, I very much value the role that faith plays in not just shaping the individual, but shaping our communities. Faith-based organizations lead the way in showing compassion, in providing support for the vulnerable, and in building a sense of belonging. Now, that is something I truly cherish and I want to protect. I do believe that religious freedom is vital to a diverse democratic society, and that individuals and communities must have the freedom to worship, to organize, and to live in accordance with their faiths. And this includes religious institutions expressing their values and fostering their communities. I also believe in the dignity and the rights of every individual. And I don't believe that the values of compassion and inclusion are at odds with the right to worship. Now, where I draw the line, and where the Greens draw the line, is where religious freedom is used as a cover for discrimination, particularly against members of the LGBTQ+ community, against women, and against members of other faiths. I'd like to clarify that this extends to all religious institutions and not just Christian organizations. I believe that faith-based organizations must be supported to continue their vital work without being forced to compromise, and where individuals are also protected from being excluded, rejected, or harmed just by virtue of who they are. Now, the Greens support anti-discrimination laws, and we support religious freedom in the positive sense, which means to live your faith, to organize in your communities, and to serve your communities. If elected, I will work to build understanding through deliberation, regardless of viewpoints, because these are complex human questions. And I believe that no one group or one person has all the answers, but I believe that we can get the best answers through dialogue, through love, and through mutual respect, and not through division and fear. I believe that God's love is for everyone. Thank you.
Full disclosure, I'm reading what I was sent because I'm doing a job representing this party, asking you to put Family First 1 to give Luke ammunition. Got it? Okay. Family First will safeguard the positive rights of faith-based organisations, including churches, charities and educational institutions, to operate in full alignment with their beliefs, values and mission. This includes the vital freedom to employ staff and engage volunteers who both believe in and live out the ethos of their faith. We believe that the Judeo-Christian ethic is the foundation of true freedom and tolerance in Australia, and this ethic informs our policy making for the common good. Faith-based organisations are a cornerstone of community life, offering vital services and moral leadership. To protect their integrity, we will legislate to ensure that they can make staffing and operational decisions that reflect their conviction without fear of legal reprisal or government interference. Freedom of religion and conscience is a fundamental right. Family First will repeal anti-discrimination provisions that currently threaten this freedom and abolish institutions like the Australian Human Rights Commission that have undermined it. We believe in subsidiary empowering local communities and institutions rather than centralised control, because real freedom and responsibility begins at the grassroots. By restoring these rights, we affirm that a flourishing free society is one in which faith-based organisations are empowered, not punished, for living out their values in service to others. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Phil. Well, look, religious freedom in Australia is absolutely essential, and as your Member of Parliament, I'll vote to make sure that it remains that way. If Parliament puts up votes in relation to these matters, I stand for religious freedom, for the rights of the individual, and for what is right and correct. We have issues in Parliament right now behind the scenes where the government, for example, has stripped charities like Scripture Union Australia, SU chaplains in school. If you make a donation to them, it's no longer tax deductible. That's what the Labor Albanese government has stripped away. Why? Because it's an ideologically based issue where they don't want tax deductions for school chaplains. That's wrong. And schools have a right to hire staff that meet their faith standards and expectations. I mean, I went to a Catholic school, but whether it's a Christian school or a Muslim school, they should be able to hire staff that meet their faith-based expectations as long as they are teaching the Australian curriculum. Right now, we have issues in some states where people can't even pray for people that ask for prayer in relation to transgender issues. They could find themselves in court, as Sharon was saying before. That's wrong. I'm not afraid to speak for what is right. In New South Wales, we have Greens MPs right now wanting abortion on demand and ensuring that if you're a nurse who might have a certain faith that doesn't want to be involved with that procedure, that you have to do it. We've seen the Labor government and the ACT, and it's supported by the Greens, actually take over Canberra Hospital because Canberra Hospital is a Catholic-based hospital, wouldn't perform abortion on demand. So I stand for freedom of religion. I stand for government should not be involved in faith-based institutions, and they shouldn't be legislating against them. I also believe that the body is a temple. So if you go back to during COVID and COVID-19, in COVID-19, everyone, it was mandatory to basically have vaccinations. Whilst I had a vaccination, one of my staff didn't want to. That was fine by me. The body's a temple. You don't want to get it, then you don't have to. It's up to you. But too often we see government and politicians saying one thing, that, oh, we believe in rights of everyone, but when it comes down to it, the parties are not often doing it. And my party's not perfect either, but as your Member of Parliament, as the member for Petrie, if I'm re-elected, I'll stand for these values, and that's what I believe. Thank you.
Thank you all for your thought-through responses to that and for staying on topic. We are really most grateful for that. Our next topic is around gambling, and it is perhaps the sleeper issue, and yet in so many households it is front and centre. The costs of gambling are not only dollars and cents. They spin out into domestic violence, mental health, and indeed simply the ability for households to make ends meet. As I said, it's no joke anymore that Australians will bet on two flies crawling up the wall. We'll gamble on just about anything. It wasn't too long ago that tobacco advertising was banned on television because we recognised the costs and the damage of that. And that has been part of discussion and debate in recent times about the level of flooding advertising and encouraging people to gambling. And so our next question is around that, and it basically follows from the Murphy inquiry into this. So Australians lose more to gambling per capita than any other country. Gambling addiction has serious consequences, not only for individuals, but for families and for wider communities. Will our candidates commit to the implementation of all 31 recommendations of the Murphy Review to protect our children and the community from the harms of gambling? And I will ask Nikhil to begin.
Thanks, Phil. Do we have anyone who follows cricket here? A few hands up. Okay, well, you'd know that watching the Border Gavaskar Trophy last summer, for me, would have been a very painful experience for two reasons. First, I got to see the Indian team get decimated by the mighty Australian force. But secondly, and more importantly, I was bombarded by gambling ads over and over and over again to the point it was sickening. Now, Australia loses more money to gambling per capita than any country in the world, and this is no accident. This is a systemic failure, one that's fueled by relentless advertising and a political class that's just too afraid to stand up to the gambling lobby. Now, the Murphy Review laid out clear, solid solutions to tackle the gambling crisis. This includes the likes of phasing out gambling advertising, setting up a national regulator, and protecting vulnerable communities. But despite the evidence and despite the pleas of their own backbenchers and even their communications minister, the Labour government has failed to act. In fact, we now know that Albanese has intervened himself in protecting the gambling industry, and this is deeply disturbing. Now, the Greens' position on this has been crystal clear. We have pushed again and again on gambling reform and even on banning gambling ads. We've offered to pass legislation on this, and in the next parliament, if we are in minority government, this will be a key ask in our negotiations. I do want to close by saying that this isn't just a policy issue. It's a moral obligation that we have. I've seen how gambling harm can ripple through families, through friendships, and through entire communities. The gambling lobby is powerful, but as a community, together, we are more powerful still. And if elected, I will push for the full adoption of Murphy's review's recommendations. And this is not just because of the evidence, but I think we owe it to the people who've already lost so much.
So, Family First is committed to protecting children, families and communities from the devastating harms of gambling. While we support strong action against gambling-related harm, including many of the objectives outlined in the Murphy Review, we believe each of its 31 recommendations must be assessed through the lens of what best upholds the dignity of the human person, strengthens families and protects the vulnerable, especially children. Family First already advocates for phasing out poker machines, redirecting revenue into an industry adjustment fund to support affected communities and businesses. Where a full phase-out cannot be achieved, we support measures like the cashless gaming card to reduce harm. We believe in decisive action that gets people off the streets and into services, and we're committed to ensuring a generous safety net that lifts people from poverty, often exacerbated by gambling addiction. Our guiding principle is always the common good, and that includes shielding children from predatory gambling practices. We'll carefully consider and, where appropriate, implement the Murphy Review recommendations that align with our core values: protecting life, supporting families, promoting virtue, and ensuring freedom through personal and community responsibility. In short, we support strong gambling reform, but we will do it in a way that is principled, practical, and people first. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much. Look, in relation to gambling, I really don't gamble myself, so it's not something that I really support. I must admit I've had the odd game of poker here and there with my sons and so forth, but yeah, gambling is not something that I really think is important. When I was growing up as a teenager, gambling, even poker machines were illegal in Queensland, as was prostitution and a whole lot of things. The state Labor government legislated for all those things to be approved. But at the end of the day, I think gambling does have a big impact on people. Our Shadow Minister, Melissa McIntosh MP, Shadow Minister for Communications, has said that the Labor government has been isolated in Parliament in relation to gambling. The opposition leader, Peter Dutton, took leadership on this issue nearly 2 years ago, stating the coalition's position is to ban gambling ads 1 hour before, during and one after live sports broadcasts. A bill was put to the Senate, but Labor and the Greens voted against it. I won't go on, I can show you the press release after that. The reality is that your MP, that if I'm re-elected, if issues come before the Parliament in relation to gambling, I'm not a fan. I think restrictions need to be put in place, and I would support those restrictions. In relation to the 31 recommendations, I've got all those 31 recommendations here. Often committees do good work. I was on the Communications Committee as the chair of it between 2016 and 2019. The 31 recommendations on this committee, it's important that ministers look at those recommendations of parliamentary committees and act on it. Now, the LNP, Melissa McIntosh, the member for Lindsay, would be our minister in that regard. But I don't think they have, the party has put a position on all 31 recommendations. Recommendation 5 in relation to more regulation, I think, is a little bit of an issue, so I don't think we'd support all recommendations. But generally, as your member for Peachtree, I'm not supportive of gambling in general, and would support any good legislation that came before the House, and I'd be happy for you always to talk to me about that so I could speak on it in Parliament. Thank you.
Well, in the vein of being honest and transparent, as I intend to be, I've felt the sting of a lost bet. I'm a Titans supporter. That's all I really know. So I'll always be there to back the underdog. But it's often said to me, you as a PT, as a gym manager, what do you know of addiction? What do you know of gambling and how it impacts lives? I work with substance addiction. I work with people who get addicted to training. I get people who are addicted to gambling. They need that release and they do come to the gym. But a broken leg or a strained muscle from addiction to running will heal. Addiction to gambling is not that easy. It's going to impact those around you. And it's taking serious issue. It's a big serious issue. And it is, in Australia, it is prevalent. It's one of those things we will bet on two flies racing up the wall. One Nation and myself, we strongly, support strong reforms. And with regards to the Murphy Review, while we will review and obviously look over each of the recommendations, and referring back to what Luke said, we may not undertake all, but we do support strong reform in this area. We know that it needs to be done. We know how it impacts the communities. You yourselves within your communities here have seen the impacts of this. So we know that the reforms need to be there and they need to be addressed, and someone needs to take a strong stand on that. It's targeting our youth within social media, it's targeting our youth, and it's prevalent, it's constantly there. You watch a sporting game for the enjoyment of the sport and you are bombarded with advertising. You are constantly reminded that there's another way to spend your money or to lose your money, lose what you've hard earned. Those ads are more persistent than Albo's ads or Trumpet's text to you right now. So what we need to do is we need to look over the recommendations. We need to find the ones that are going to take action, that are going to take effect and are going to make a difference.
Thank you all very much. I've been impressed with the, and we don't normally take confession in the Uniting Church, but people's allegiances here have surprised me. The Australia-India cricket thing, I mean, you're on thin ice there. But I really must say, somebody who lives in Redcliffe and supports the Titans. I mean, really, what happened to Fins Up?
I've been a Gold Coast girl since they were the Giants. That's how
All right. All right. Well, you know, we don't have a sporting question on the list, ladies and gentlemen, so that's fair enough. But the next is a very serious matter, and everybody has alluded to it, and it is the cost of living. Australia is in a cost of living crisis, and depending on how you measure that, certainly we've not seen this in the last 50 years, where young people are now worse off financially than their parents, and an increasing number of people unable to afford the basics of living. So before we go to the more specific area of homelessness and affordable housing, our question is, what will you do to ease the cost of living pressures on individuals and families, especially those most at risk? Sharon, I would ask you to begin. Thank you.
I've got the family first thing here, but from my own experience, I would love to see people do creative things to help others, and there's so many solutions we could come up with. I actually help make a meal I go the other direction. I don't come up here and help the people that are up here feeding the homeless, but I do it twice a week in the valley. So I see a little bit of stuff, and I'm meeting people all the time who are in stress. And anyway, yeah, I'll just read what they say. I won't get through otherwise. Okay. Family First will ease the cost of living pressures on individuals and families by restoring the economic conditions in which families can thrive, especially those most at risk. We believe every family should have the opportunity to raise children, own a home, and live comfortably on the one wage if they so choose. We managed to do that, and I cry about the fact that so many can't do that these days. I did stay home with our kids. I've had an amazing life, even though you make sacrifices. Just saying. So that's a little bit more about me. To make it a reality, we'll reduce the tax burden on families, remove the couple penalty for single income households, and consider Hungarian-style tax breaks for mothers of 3 or more children. We also support income splitting for mums and dads to ensure fairer taxation. Housing affordability will be addressed by releasing more land and cutting red tape to increase supply and lower prices. We will tackle energy costs by pausing net zero policies until a full cost-benefit analysis is done, keeping coal and gas in the energy mix and pursuing nuclear energy for long-term reliability. So I'm going to get my glasses, I'm so sorry. I don't use them very often, but I'm finding I'm being stilted without them. We'll fight inflation by reducing government spending, cutting unnecessary programs and supporting small businesses. Families with larger vehicles will receive a registration rebate, and we'll support affordable education focused on core skills, free from ideological agendas. Family First believes economic freedom, strong local communities and sound public policy are the keys to lifting people out of poverty and reducing financial pressure. Thank you.
Well, look, 3 minutes is not enough time to talk about cost of living, but cost of living has been huge in the last 3 years. Easing the cost of living on individuals and families, especially those at risk, is important. We have a strong safety net in Australia that we're proud of, whether it's Job Seeker, Medicare, support for NDIS, support for aged care, the pension. But right now, the people that are really feeling the cost of living are working families. People that are working with children, paying rent or trying to pay off their mortgage. And the Prime Minister 3 years ago, this is important because it comes down to trust in leadership, looked Australians in the eye in 2022 and said, cost of living will be cheaper under me. Life will be cheaper under me. In fact, he promised 99 times to cut your power bill by $275. Now, there wouldn't be a person in this room that's had their power bill reduced by $275. In fact, it's gone up significantly, probably about 30%, and without any sort of ongoing rebates, when they're gone, you're going to cop it. And in the future, our power plan is $10 billion a year cheaper than Labor and the Greens for the next 25 years. I'll talk more about that later. So the other thing is that the last coalition budget, Liberal National Party budget, that was delivered in 2022, since that time, just 3 years ago, it was about $500 billion. The Albanese government, with the support of the Greens in the Senate, has spent an additional $400 billion of taxpayer money in the middle of a cost of living crisis, and that has fuelled inflation. Every time you spend more government money and throw it on the fire, that had fuelled inflation, and as a result, we saw 12 interest rate rises that sent mortgages up by a minimum of $30,000 a year or $600 a week, and rents up by a minimum of $100 a week. And what's happened? That has seen a homelessness crisis. So we have to, in relation to cost of living, immediate results to try and reduce it. One, 25 cents a litre off your fuel every time you fill up petrol and diesel, $14 a week savings, some $800 a year. $1,200 when you actually put back your tax return. And the Prime Minister as well, word on heart, I won't change stage 3 tax cuts, promised it, and then he changed it. And that impacted those families earning between $45,000 and $200,000, trying to raise their kids, trying to pay for the rent. And he increased that to a 37% rate. So at the end of cost of living, you've got to have integrity. And if you can't trust the leader of the country, then they're not fit for leadership.
Well, personally, I'm living the cost of living crisis. Myself, my partner and I, we're looking to buy our first home. And instead of having that dream and going, yes, we're going to do this year, I'm now looking for a second job to cover our costs because our electricity bills have gone through the roof to the point where me working at home is not viable anymore. I've got to walk to work because when the decision comes between, are we going to have the cash there to pay for our electricity bill, or do I put the fuel in my car? It's all right, I'll just hike to work. It's all right. I'm fit enough, I'm healthy enough, I'll make it happen. But not everyone's that lucky. So we need to actually make some drastic changes. And I got promised the same as everyone else. I got promised, hand on heart, those tax cuts weren't getting touched, and they did. Now, it doesn't seem like it's much, but when your tax bill comes through and you're forking out for private health, you're forking out for everything else, that little bit back, it counts, it matters. It means there's a new fridge, the service on the car happens, but people don't have that anymore. We don't have that, and it was lied. It was promised, and it was lied. So we promise to come in. We're going to freeze the fuel excise for 2 years with the look to review. My pretty face was on that policy just before Peter announced it. We're going to cut wasteful government spending. The more promises, the more money that's spent, it doesn't come from nowhere. Someone has to pay for it, and it's you. Every dollar that is spent, you have to pay for that. That's yours. We're going to restore Australians' energy independence, investing in coal, gas, nuclear and renewables to bring the power prices down. There is no reason our power prices need to be where they are. We're an energy-rich country and we are suffering under the current government. We're going to revive Australian manufacturing to strengthen our supply chains and reduce reliance on expensive imports. $1 saved. And we're going to increase pension and welfare rates responsibly without blowing the budget well out of the water.
Yeah, the cost of living crisis is hurting people right across the community. We've been out there talking to people, and we've had young people across the community come and tell me that they've given up on their dream of home ownership. We've had families choosing between rent and paying for groceries. We've had pensioners skipping meals just to get by. It really doesn't have to be this way. Not in a country like Australia where we have an enormous amount of wealth. Unfortunately, a lot of that wealth is hoarded at the top. And what we really need now is the political will, and that's where the Greens come into the picture. We want to bring dental and mental into Medicare, and we've proven that this is possible. The last time we were in a minority government, we brought dental into Medicare for kids under 18, and we just want to finish what we've started. We want to open public health clinics and bring back free GP visits so that no one should have to delay their care because of the cost. We also want to tackle price gouging, not just at the supermarkets, as I said before. So we want to cap unlimited rent increases. We want to regulate the banks to force down mortgage rates. We want to make price gouging illegal at the supermarkets. And I think it's time to break up the duopoly of Coles and Woolies and put food security ahead of corporate greed. Now, every parent wants to give their child a strong start, and often they do so at the sacrifice of their own luxuries. This is why we want to bring in universally free childcare, free early childhood education, and a world-class, genuinely free public schooling system. On the energy front, we want to further subsidize solar and battery systems for homes and for small businesses, this thereby lowering power bills while tackling the climate crisis. We also want to make sure that nobody is left behind. So we want to lift the pension rate, we want to lower the retirement age, and we want to raise Centrelink payments above the poverty line. I think in a country like Australia, everyone deserves to live with dignity and a decent standard of living. Now, when it comes to costing, all of these policies are fully costed by the PBO. And no, they're not coming out of mine and your accounts because we are paying tax like responsible citizens. But we have a lot of billionaires in this country and multinational corporations that are avoiding tax through several mechanisms. And we want to bring that money back into our coffers to fund the services that we all rely on. Thank you.
The great Australian dream, that phrase I think was used by everyone here. The idea that young people and even those of us a little older would have our own place and someone to raise our families is certainly seeming beyond the reach of many. It is not something to be taken for granted any longer. Matters of affordable housing for someone in my circumstance is one thing, but actual homelessness is the reality for many, many thousands of Australians, and that number is growing. So in the last few years, we've seen this explosion of homelessness. People living in tents, and let's face it, if you were to be homeless in Melbourne or in Queensland where the sun shines, where would you come? And so we see, particularly in places such as this and along the coast of Queensland, right up to Cairns, more and more people sleeping rough, and that lack of affordable houses to buy and to rent. Buying a house seems out of reach for so many people. And so our question around that, what are your party's policies for addressing this housing crisis? In the short term, and in particular, the lack of affordable homes to either buy or rent, and the consequent explosion of people experiencing homelessness. And I think we began with Sharon last time, so it's Luke, first cab off the rank.
All right, well, 3 minutes is nowhere near long enough to talk about housing and homelessness, but we're in a major issue at the moment. The last 3 years have been out of control when it comes to homelessness. Now, during the last government, 2019 to 2022, I was the National Assistant Minister for Community Housing, Homelessness and Community Services. We actually get our homelessness numbers from the census every 5 years. So when you do your census every 5 years, 2016, 2021, the next one's due next year in 2026. These are the facts. Between 2016 and 2021, acute homelessness reduced under the coalition government when I was the Assistant Minister. Acute homelessness fell, rough sleeping fell, severe overcrowding fell, and couch surfing fell. So there's about 100,000 people every night in Australia that are classed as homelessness, 10,000 of which are rough sleepers. But if you go back 3 years ago, there was not the number of homelessness that you see now. We have had an explosion of homelessness along the Redcliffe waterfront, along Deception Bay. Have people seen it? You must have seen it, because you drive over the bridge at Hornibrook Bridge just down here in October, there was camper vans, tents, all there. All there. They're all gone at the moment. But what I'm saying is that in the last 3 years since the Albanese government has come in, with the support of the Greens in the Senate, homelessness has exploded. There's a number of reasons. One, they brought in 1.5 million migrants in 2.5 years. And when we were in government, that number was about 550,000. Now, I love migrants. My office manager's a migrant. There's candidates on stage, maybe you guys are migrants, but at the end of the day, if you go from 550,000 in 3 years to 1.5 million and don't build any new housing stock, you're in trouble. Out of 1.5 million people, 5,000 of them were builders. That's wrong. So we're going to reduce that for a while and readjust migration with housing. 5% of the stock is on community and social housing. The Palaszczuk government, back when Joh Bjelke-Petersen was in Queensland, community and social housing was about 15%. It's now 5% of the stock, and the Palaszczuk government didn't build any new community housing for 10 years. They finally changed their tune. The first one under construction is behind Moncomo for women over 50. That's where your rent is capped at 30%. Very important. But the other thing around the dream of home ownership, you don't solve it by freezing rents and reducing negative gearing, because 95% of the stock is by investors, and most people that are investors are police and nurses. The reason why there's no new homes, because we've seen 12 interest rate rises in the last 3 years. No one can afford to build. That's my 3 minutes. I could talk on this all night, but I'm happy to take questions after. Thank you.
You've heard me talk about the Great Australian Dream. I have it myself. And for every dollar I save, the goalposts move further and further away. It seems more and more impossible. I spent my earlier years working in the real estate industry, and we used to get super excited when a new suburb would get its first $1 million house. Now, as a first home buyer, I get really excited if I see a house that's, relatively under 700,000, something achievable. It's slipping away, the Great Australian Dream. It's more like a memory. It's one of those things where when older generations say to me, just get your foot on the property ladder. I'm a size 5, I've got no chance. So skyrocketing prices, rental shortages, and homelessness. I've grown up in this area, and I've never seen homelessness like it is. That's what happens when you bring people in consistently and unsustainably. Where are you going to put them? If you're not building the infrastructure to house these people, you are setting them up to fail, and that's what we've seen over the last 3 years. We've seen a government that just wanted to prop up their budget by bringing people in and having nowhere to put them. They brought them in on the promise of the Great Australian Dream and left them to flounder, and then left the Australians there to pick up the pieces and pay for it. One Nation policies will prioritise our first home buyers over investors and foreign buyers. We want to see Australian homes for Australians. We want to make sure that the houses that we build are staying here. They're for your families. They're for your kids, your grandkids. We want to cut the red tape for local, state and federal levels to speed up getting things built. And we want to make sure that we are getting the tradespeople in to get the work done. We're bolstering that tradie, the Australian tradie. That's what the highways used to be filled with. Now they're just all your EVs heading down into the city. You used to see your tradies out there getting these houses built for people, and now we don't. So we're going to bolster that. We're going to build it. So if elected, I'm going to come in and I'm going to make home ownership achievable for young Australians, because I want my first home. I want to be successful. I want this great Australian dream. I'm going to push for higher restrictions on foreign ownership and immigration settings to match our housing capacity. We are committed to reducing immigration so that we can get our own house in order first.
So owing to the points that the other candidates have made, before I get into the notes that I've put here, I just want to put something on people's minds that at the last census, we had 1 million houses vacant. Just to put that out there. Also, the number of foreign-owned transactions that happen on housing in Australia is less than 2,000 per year. Okay, just putting that out there. I have refrained from talking about other parties' policies, but it's really hard to ignore them for this one. So let's talk about LNP's housing policy. They want me to raise up to 50K of my super for the deposit and make mortgage repayments tax deductible. Now, I'm somebody like you, Sharon, who's looking to, Nicole, who's looking to get into the housing market by buying my first home. And so this does sound like an attractive proposition for me. But it doesn't really take much research and seeing what's happened in other countries that have implemented things like this to understand and to see through this plan. Their advertising says that it'll put up to 12K back into my bank account, which sounds like a weird get-rich-quick scheme. And trust me, when a brown person tells you that something is a scam, it probably is. In reality, what this is going to do is it's going to push housing prices higher while draining people's retirement savings. It's giving a leg up to those who are already ahead. Leading economists have come out and called it a joke because that's what it is. It basically benefits the LNP property speculator mates with multiple properties in their portfolio. And I don't think that there's any party, at least not the major parties out there, who are tackling the real issue, which is that the housing market in this country has been distorted by decades of policy that is designed to favor speculators and not people looking to buy their first or their second home. I do thank them for their poor policies, though, to be honest, because it's shined a light on the Greens policy, which I believe is the only one that wants to put a downward pressure on the housing crisis. We want to level the playing field for first home buyers, renters, and genuine small-time investors, and we want to do this by phasing out negative gearing and the capital gains tax discount, which has caused the housing prices to soar in the first place. For renters, we want to cap unlimited rent increases, ban no-grounds evictions, introduce real national tenancy standards, so that stable and affordable rentals can be the norm and not a luxury. On the social and public housing front, we want to build 610,000 affordable homes over the next decade by establishing a federally owned public property developer to rent and sell below the market prices. These are homes that make communities, not profits, by the way. We want to confront the homelessness crisis head on. We want to do this by fully funding support services, especially for people who are dealing with substance addiction issues. And we want to expand crisis accommodation, particularly for women, for children, and for young people. I believe housing is a human right. I don't think too many people here would disagree with me when I say that. And I think the Greens are the only party that have a bold plan to treat it like one.
As I alluded to before, Family First doesn't currently have a housing policy, but Alan's working on it, and he was having a good chat to the Greens person, and what he said also to me on the way up here today, I would just like to ask him to come up and talk. Is he allowed to come up and...
We have seen this candidate.
Okay, all right. You can't just remove the negative gearing and the capital gains thing straight away. Yes, we suggest that it does have adjustments to it, but not retrospectively. People have made decisions and they're living their lives according to how things are at the moment. But so I'm not speaking as the Family First Party. I'm speaking from the small amount of things that I heard Alan say. What I would say from my own personal experience of seeing people, I've been part of the Buy Nothing project in our area, and people, I had a free op shop for 8 months, and people would just give me a whole pile of stuff, and I rehoused fridges and blah, 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 all sorts of things and clothes and whatever. And the people that I met doing that, they were struggling, and there were people who were having to move out of the suburb because they couldn't afford their rents or downsize. So yeah, homelessness is a huge issue. It would be wrong to say that it's just addicts and people with big issues that are homeless. There is people, I think I should just stop talking, but Family First is working on it, and any area that that you would like to make suggestions to us, we certainly listen to people. It's a grassroots party. We welcome solutions. We don't like gentrification. We don't like the fact that the prices go so far up. I live in Banyo, and the other day there was a house that sold for $2.1 million, and I went to have a look at it. It wasn't just a house, and I felt it was wrong to just say it was a house because it had a huge amount of land and horse paddock and big sheds and all that sort of thing. And I just felt, gosh, what are people going to think if they think there's a house for $2.1 million? My heart grieves for the fact that the prices have gone so far up. And I think most Family First candidates would as well.
In many respects, this is an election about very immediate and very personal issues for many of us. But our final matter this evening is in a sense, an ongoing one and a big picture question. There are those who would suggest that other questions, in fact, hang off it in the long term anyway. But the care of creation has been a part of Christian values and the significant part of our story ever since the creation story. And Australia is seeing an increasing number and the severity of the natural disasters that have always been a part of our landscape. But we're also seeing this large-scale habitat loss and also the growing number of species facing extinction or coming under threat. So the question for each of our party representatives, what are your policies for protecting the natural environment so that we might effectively steward creation into the future for following generations? And I'm trying to recall where we began. Nicole is first. Thanks.
All right, we knew this one was coming, but look, I acknowledge that climate change happens. It always has and it always will. But we do not support an extreme net zero. For this, guys, our natural environment here in Australia is unique. I've travelled, it's brilliant. What we've got, our beaches, our forests, our rainforests, our deserts, everything is incredible here, and it needs to be protected. However, our real conservation requires practical action, local knowledge, and balanced policies, not ideological or extremes. So we support practical local conservation efforts, funding reforestation, habitat research, feral animal control, and fire management programs led by communities. My father was part of the forestry for his whole working life. I've seen the impacts of mismanaged bushland, the impacts that it has when we don't take care of what we've been so graciously given being Australians here in our environment. We will fight for the common sense environmental policies that genuinely protect our land for future generations and stand against radical climate policies that destroy industries and just drive up the cost of living. We need to take a real good look at what these renewable energy projects are doing. What footprint are they leaving behind, and how, if we create them now, are they being regenerated in future for our future It's cool to put up a solar farm now, but how? How is that land restored for our farmers and our future generations? Same with our wind farms offshore. How are we reclaiming that back for our future generations? So I'll back practical local environment programs that actually make a difference and ensure that energy projects all just enhance our diversity there, not destroy our environment. And I will push for real Australian solutions, not just ones that sound good in the media.
Now, I was raised to believe that creation is sacred. Oceans, forests, animals, land, they're not just resources to be extracted, they're gifts that we've been blessed with. And as stewards of that gift, we have a duty to protect this. Not just for ourselves, but also for the creatures that we share this planet with, and for our future generations. Right now, we are miserably failing in that duty. We are in the middle of a climate crisis and an extinction crisis. Worsening bushfires, floods, and droughts have become normal. We've bulldozed more than 7 million hectares of threatened species habitat in the past 2 decades. And yet the major parties keep teaming up to open new coal and gas projects. Now, the Greens believe that care for creation must be at the heart of political decision-making. We want to invest 1% of the federal budget, which increases it to twice as what we are investing already, into protecting Australia's environment, preventing extinctions, halting a decline in the biodiversity, and restoring critical habitats. This includes stronger laws to protect nature, led by a well-resourced, independent environmental protection agency that holds polluters to account. We also want to phase out coal and gas and invest into a just transition into 100% renewable energy, but thereby securing thousands of jobs in the climate and in the energy sector. We also support First Nations land and water management strategies to restore ecosystems in partnership with the oldest living custodians of this country. To be honest, like if I want to present Greens environmental policies, it's probably going to take me a lot longer than 3 minutes, but I'm going to bring it back to this point, that this isn't just about the environment, the climate, or the animals. It's about justice. Whether it's about intergenerational justice, climate justice, or ecological justice, we need to understand that we're not just here to manage the decline of nature, we're here to fight for its restoration. We want to be the good ancestors that our grandkids will thank one day, and as someone who sees the divine reflected in the natural world, I believe that in protecting for the creation, we get closer to our Creator.
Once again, there's not a question on my pieces of paper, not an answer to that from the Family First Party. So, Family First, I've already said what our policies are on energy. We're not in favour of net zero. I can remember back when I was a child, we talked about being conservationists. We valued the world and we wanted to care for it. But now we're environmentalists. And it seems to me from a Christian point of view that we're worshipping the world rather than recognising that it's a wonderful blessing to be enjoyed. And yes, we should care for it. Most definitely we should care for it. But not worship it. And people are more important than animals. They're, in a Christian viewpoint, they are made in the image of God and they are the highest part of creation. Now, some of you here probably think that's a ridiculous thing to say. But without going any further along, I'd actually like to perhaps inform you of what's going on in southeast Queensland at the moment with the fire ants thing. There's baits being put out and destroying so much of our biodiversity with the fire ants program, because I'm not even sure if it's local government or state government or federal government, but I would encourage you to look at that. If you're concerned about our local environment here in southeast Queensland, look at the fire ants eradication program. It's doing a lot of damage, and it's also... Anyway, I'll leave it there, but I think that's probably what I can say on that. Yes, we should steward creation, absolutely. And we should also be allowed to enjoy creation, not be seen as a plague upon the planet.
Well, thank you. We do need to protect the natural environment. I think the current government has done a few good things in this space. Macquarie Island down in the Antarctic region, they've made another national park, which I feel was a good decision by the current Labor government. I think the big issues are around endangered species and feral pests. So there's some real problems with feral pests in Australia, things like cane toads, carp in our rivers, and the European fox. European foxes destroy native turtle nests. They dig them up and eat the freshwater eggs. Boars and pigs do the same with sea turtles, so there need to be controls around feral pests. The other thing with housing is that what they're saying at the moment to developers, right, they say, oh, developers are no good. If you have let's say you've got 20 hectares, right now the Federal Environment Department is saying, yep, you've got 20 hectares, there's a few koala trees on there, you've got to lock up another 60 hectares. Now that's not always right, because what that is doing is pushing up house pricing and stopping new land being released, is what we spoke about before. So sometimes you can have good environmental laws, sometimes the laws need to be looked at and changed, because that is creating a housing issue. Finally, let me get to energy, and let me talk about the Coalition's plan for gas, renewables and emissions-free modern nuclear power. Right now, we have a 2050 net zero plan, both the major parties do, in 25 years. Our plan is $250 billion cheaper than Labor and the Greens. The Albanese government is saying $600 billion for modern nuclear, it's $120 billion. That's the truth. And the issue is why you're going to save a lot with our plan is that if you want to cut down or get rid of all coal and gas by 2050, which is what's going to happen in 25 years, not long, you can use the existing transmission network where all the high voltage power lines are and drop in modern nuclear power. We already have 8 nuclear-powered submarines. We already have a nuclear reactor in the middle of Sydney for modern nuclear medicine. This makes sense because what it will prevent is if you go right now, even with our plan, renewables will double. The current renewables, all the wind and solar, it will double by 2050. Without modern nuclear, in the next 25 years, that will be 6-fold. And what that means is 27,000 kilometres of new high-voltage transmission across our beaches, into our bays, out at sea for wind farms, and across our agricultural land, through our forests for solar panels. Now, all of these solar panels and wind farms are made in China. They need replacing every 20 years. A hailstorm hits them, they're all gone. There's high emissions to build them. Emissions-free modern nuclear lasts 100 years, and it uses the current transmission network. It makes sense, and it's one of the biggest environmental things that you can do to help the environment at this election. Without it, we're in deep trouble in 25 years. And your power bills will keep going up.
Thank you all. We're going to take 30 seconds to stand up, turn around, do the hokey pokey, do a bit of that, bit of this. Now maybe this is, Nicole, that was your moment. That was your moment to get in and do a bit of that stuff. That's right, and see just how bad our hammies all are. Now we do have some questions that I think what I'll do, there's a couple that are directed particularly to the minor parties, and then there's a couple here that I think I'll simply ask if people are keen to answer, if it's an issue you particularly want to buy into. I'm aware that there are some issues that are simply not at the top of your list. But to the minor parties, the question is, do you rule out a coalition with Labor or the LNP? Can we start with One Nation?
We've been quite transparent and open on this. We won't have a coalition with the Labor. Labor and Greens are last on our ticket. Pauline has come forward, and with our support, we will side with the LNP. Pretty simple.
Greens?
We'd be happy to form a coalition government with Labour. When it comes to LNP, I think we are really worried about the impact of someone like Mr. Dutton on our country. And so, well, if he doesn't win in the seat of Dixon, which is quite likely, we may be open to discussions, but as long as he's the leader of the party, we wouldn't be considering it.
Sharon, family first and agreements in coalition. I think you've made it clear that the LNP would be getting your preferences.
Got it.
There we are. Big ticket items here, defence spending. I'll take the second part of it first. Will the recent submarine project for the nuclear submarine fleet make Australia more safe or less safe in future years, and why? And this is a if you'd like to take it on board question.
Yeah, the AUKUS Pact will make Australia safer in the future. It's 100% essential. It has support of both major parties. It's the first time ever that the US has shared this technology with anyone in the world outside Britain. The reality is I have a son who's a lieutenant in the Australian Army. We have a strong defence force because we want peace. That's why, and I'm really proud my son has chosen to serve his nation, and I would encourage other people to do it. We have a small ADF of only 60,000 full-time members and 30,000 reserves. China has 2 million full-time members. The US has 1 million. And the reality is that in the past, we've been through World War I, we've been through World War II, we have a strong relationship with the US, whether it's Democrat or Republican in the White House. And sharing that nuclear technology with us is essential. If you're in a submarine, in a diesel-electric submarine, right now, they run on electric battery, and then they need to recharge with a diesel motor and come up to snort and let the fumes out. We've recently had 3 Chinese warships, which the Prime Minister didn't even know about, live firing off the eastern seaboard. This is the first time they've ever circumnavigated Australia. And our allies have said we are in a strategic, the risk of war is high. It's been revealed recently that Russia have asked for an airbase in Indonesia. That's the truth. And having silent submarines that never need to surface, they have desalination plants on them for water. The only time they need to surface is for food, for the crew. So it is absolutely essential that we have them. It is a deterrent, and it sends a clear message to other countries that we have a strong defence force, we have strong allies, not just with the US and Britain, but with Japan, with India. We have good relationships in Southeast Asia. That's important. Australia banks on good relationships with our allies, and that's what keeps us safe. But a strong defence force means a safe Australia.
Thank you, Luke. Is there anyone else particularly wants to buy into the submarine fleet investment? Thank you, Nikhil.
I don't know how many of you have looked into the AUKUS deal and the AUKUS agreement. We're agreeing to pay, on an average, $13 billion a year to acquire this in the future, which we may or may not get. I would highly encourage you to look into the conditions that have been set by the US. We are also paying for the United States to build and maintain their facilities to build these nuclear submarines for us, which we may or may not get once again. We are also going to have to manage our own nuclear waste facility in Adelaide and put our people at their own health risks. For submarines, which we may or may not get, for an average of $13 billion a year. What we can get for less than that amount, let me just throw a few things to you, and this is not even the comprehensive list. Free school lunches, forward estimates, again, all of this is costed by the Parliamentary Budget Office. Free school lunches and forward estimates, which for those of you who don't know is what the budget for this it will be for the next 4 years, is $11.6 billion for 4 years, not per year. Since the bell's gone, I might just pick 2 other random ones. Yeah, here we go. $31.69 billion over the next decade, just for planning, building, staffing, and the operations for 1,000 free local healthcare clinics. $31 billion over the next decade, not 13 billion every year, for 50-50 hospital funding by state and federal governments. These are the things that we can achieve with the money that we have instead of submarines we may or may not get for $13 billion a year.
Family first or One Nation? Okay. Next question we have, what policies does your party have to support First Nations communities? Now that's a word for word read. I'm going to take that as particular communities, places such as Doomadgee, Alice Springs. Let's name some particular towns. What policies does your party have to support First Nations communities?
I'm happy to answer, but I'll let others go first.
I will be honest. First Nations policy is not an area of my expertise. One of the things that I did bring up when I stood for elections is letting people know, or letting my team know that I haven't been able to engage with First Nations communities as much as I would have liked to, and that's something that I intend to work on. Having said that, I know that the Greens have very strong policies in terms of First Nations communities, and which is why I'm standing here to speak to that fact, because it would be wrong for me to not talk about the Greens' support for First Nations communities, but I would encourage you to do your own read-up about Greens' policies for that.
Well, the Liberal National Party has a few policies in relation to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. One, we support Indigenous rangers who know the land, who were the first Australians, and so one of the issues that they used to do was backburning to actually clear the land and rejuvenate it. Now we're seeing state governments do very, very little of that mitigation work, and as a result we're getting larger and hotter bushfires that is pushing up your insurance bills, particularly in regional areas. So we support Indigenous rangers. The other thing was the coalition government in the federal parliament introduced an Indigenous procurement policy which enables some Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander-owned businesses to procure and get a share of government work. The other important thing, is that we want to make sure there is practical action in relation to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders to ensure that closing the gap is important. Our Shadow Minister for Indigenous Australians, Jacinta Numbajimba-Price, who is the Northern Territory Minister in the Senate, lives in Alice Springs, grew up in the Northern Territory, being Aboriginal herself, knows the first-hand issues around crime, around domestic violence, around education, and around those issues. We're focusing on that, not on woke, Canberra-based bureaucracies like The Voice, where the Prime Minister spent $500 million of Australia's taxpayers' money that was defeated in every state and was overwhelmingly rejected. When you put race-based policies just on those sorts of issues, you don't get good outcomes. You have to focus on outcomes that will help Australians, and having our minister as an Indigenous Australian is important. We had the first senator ever in the federal parliament from the Liberal Party, Senator Neville Bonner, who was Indigenous. We had the first House of Representatives member who was Indigenous, Ken Wyatt, as well in the lower house. So we want to make sure, I think Jacinta would make a great minister. She has first-hand experience and will make a real difference in this space.
Next question we've received, and by the way, thank you particularly for people online sending in your questions via Slido, and there have been a number that have actually touched on the same issues, and this is an interesting one. Would your party support an investigation, possibly even a commission, into the failing childcare industry? We've had a lot of comments about the vulnerability of children, the need for public education, and the investment in that. Sharon, you seem to be very keen to be on your feet. So an investigation into the failing childcare industry throughout this country.
I'd just say one thing. Jared Rennick has got a very good policy on childcare. He would like to see the amount of the childcare subsidy given to the parents to make a decision as to where the money goes. So it can go to the grandparents or the auntie or the sister, or and also like for people on properties. They can pay a nanny to come and live on their properties. Shift workers can access that. They can't use current childcare systems because of the hours and everything. So there's a lot of people who are actually missing out. What about stay-at-home mums? They're not getting paid for their looking after their own children. I'm not sure how that fits with Jared's policy, but I thought what he said was really, really good. I am a Jared fan, just for the record.
Thanks, Sharon. Luke?
Also to say, as we do spend billions and billions of dollars every year on childcare, part of the reason of why that was designed was to try and ensure that more people were in the workforce. We have an ageing population. It's saying that in sort of 10 or 15 years' time we'll have less workers for every person that's on retirement or on the pension, and so trying to get more people into the workforce is important. But I would welcome, and this isn't the party's position, I'm not the shadow minister, but I would welcome a look at any review of billions of dollars spent. I think the government recently changed childcare policy to put more taxpayer money into families that don't work at all to allow childcare. That's not the way it was originally designed. Under us, it was for working parents, not for people that are not working. I personally support. I was fortunate my wife was able to stay at home and leave work when we had our 3 children. I think grandparents should play an important role. Family and friends and neighbours all helping with the raising of children is important, but at the end of the day, the prime responsibility for children's care and teaching does come down to parents. So important, but always welcome expenditure review to make sure that money is being spent well.
So in this country, we have over 60% of early childhood education center providers that are run for profit, including ones that are owned by our beloved opposition leader, Mr. Dutton. We actually have a member in the audience here whose wife actually worked for a for-profit center for a very long time and then switched over to a non-for-profit center and has told us about the significant differences when it comes to not only the care for each child, but also the care for the people who work in these institutions. These for-profit centers are basically failing to keep our kids safe. Families are being hit with skyrocketing fees and high wait lists. What the Greens have proposed to do is, as I said earlier, universal free childcare. This is by providing public childcare services. We want to phase our childcare subsidy while transitioning to a new model that directly funds the childcare service. And to directly answer the question, yes, not only do we support a EC commission, but we've actually costed it, and it costs 1.5 billion over forward estimates. If I have time, I would also say that we want to provide $9 billion per year for free early childhood education, $1 billion per year for 30 hours per week preschool, and $5 billion over the decade to support public, community, and non-profit providers to scale up.
Sorry, I've just started to lose my voice, which is why I haven't said much. But with One Nation, our goal is we need less bureaucracy and more common sense in how we run and support our childcare centres. And the goal is not to just throw more money at a broken system. We need to find out where the holes are, plug the holes, and fix it before we just keep spending money on it.
Thank you, folks. We're going to go with one final question because there were a number of these, particularly put in online. So I'm going to, if you like, condense the Reader's Digest version of a lot of questions around immigration policy. So if I could ask you, how would your party prioritise? We've spoken about perhaps the need to reduce the number of immigrants. We've spoken about the impact of immigration on a number of other parts of life. How would your party prioritise those who are granted immigration citizenship to Australia? spoken about, for instance, the qualifications and the skills that people might bring to this country, but where else would we consider priorities? So people who come from circumstances of need. There was a comment about those who have worked with Australians in places where we've been involved in recent years, and there's now great persecution. So folks from Afghanistan, folks from Iraq, and so forth. How would you prioritise, how would your party prioritise immigration access to Australia?
So this question is actually, how will you ensure that persecuted religious minorities, those who cannot safely register with the UNHCR, are you still going to do that question?
No, that's not a specific question on that, but by all means.
Okay. How would we receive fair consideration in Australia's humanitarian intake and resettlement program? So the answer to that question is, Family First believes Australia's humanitarian program must prioritise those most at risk, particularly persecuted religious minorities who are often overlooked by the current UNHCR process, or who cannot safely register due to discrimination or danger in refugee camps. We will advocate for reform of Australia's humanitarian intake to ensure direct pathways for vulnerable groups fleeing religious persecution, including Christians, Yazidis and other minorities suffering under oppressive regimes. Where UNHCR process fail to protect these individuals, we will support the use of alternative referral systems such as working with trusted NGOs, faith-based organisations and community sponsorship models to identify and resettle those most in need. Our commitment to the Judeo-Christian ethic underpins this policy. We believe in freedom of religion, the inherent dignity of every human life, and the duty to protect the persecuted. Refugee and humanitarian policies must reflect these values, not simply rely on bureaucratic systems that often fail the most vulnerable. Family First will ensure that Australia's humanitarian intake prioritises not just numbers but justice, reserving places for those whose faith puts them at daily risk and for whom no other safe pathway exists. Compassion and common sense must guide our response to global religious persecution. So it's not quite the answer to the question, but I think in our policy it actually says that we would have a moratorium for a while on immigration.
Just in relation to migration, there's a couple of things. One, there's the refugee intake, and then there's migration. So previously, the former government brought in about 20,000 refugees a year. People have to be brought in on the right visa. So if they're refugees, they might be, for example, in Syria at the moment, we've seen a regime change where Christians and other people of faith are being persecuted, burned alive, everything else. There would be a need to bring those people in if they could come in. We take a certain amount, we can't bring everyone here, and that's where our foreign aid program also helps out, and it needs to be targeted to those countries specific in need. The current government brought in 3,000 people from Gaza on tourist visas. We're not going to be doing that, right? Yes, there might be a need to bring some people in on a refugee program, but they also need to be properly vetted. The other thing with immigration is to grow the economy and to provide the services and jobs that some Australians don't want to do or are unable to do. And so a large part of our migration agency might be to bring in more builders, to bring in more tradespeople, to bring in more doctors, to bring in more people that will pick fruit and so forth. It'll be targeted for that, and then we also have investor visas where people that might be high wealth individuals come into the country and they're able to start a business and employ more people and contribute to the economy. That's also involved with it. It's up to the immigration minister and often the foreign minister in relation to refugees that make that decision inside the cabinet of government. And so I would say that. Just in summing up as well, as your MP, just getting back onto housing, one of the things that I don't do is walk past people in the street. I said before there was a whole lot of homeless people around the region, I don't drive past them. I had a homeless person in my office this afternoon where I was offering them work, offering them drug and rehabilitation support, and offering to speak to the state member in relation to public housing. That's what a good MP does. I don't drive past. I'll go out and talk to these people. That's what I do locally, and that's what I'll continue to do if given the opportunity to serve again. Thank you.
Our immigration policy is pretty simple. Our immigration policy must serve Australian people first. We need lower and a skills-based immigration, stronger border security, and an immigration system that supports our national growth without overwhelming it. We've talked about our housing crisis. We also need to make sure that values are crucial into how people are coming in. We want people who are going to come in and contribute. We want them to embrace our way of life, not change it. They've come to us for that Australian dream and that Australian way of life, and that's what we want to keep thriving here. So with us guys, it is a skills-based one. We want to bring in those people. They're going to build us a better and stronger Australia.
Well, thank you all for being with us this evening, and those of you online as well. But in particular, we want to thank the 4 of you and the other 2 who will be on the ballot this coming weekend. We value the fact that we have people who are prepared to put their hands up and represent us. Thank you for doing that in the various ways that you do, bringing the passions of your heart to the needs of our community. We are indeed grateful for a robust democracy and for your part in leading that for us. Thank you all for being with us this evening. We did say we'd finish by around about between 2:45 and 9 o'clock, and we're pretty much on the money for that. If there is an opportunity to catch up with these folks, and certainly to encourage them in whatever way you can, and after Saturday as well. Thanks again for this evening. We do appreciate it.